The moment I saw him choose his ex over me at the party, something inside me shattered. I had always known he was charming, but never had I imagined how far he'd go to humiliate me. And yet, it was that very humiliation that led me to make the most shocking decision of my life. That night, in a twisted act of revenge, I walked out of the party, straight into the arms of his best friend. Logan Carter, the coldest man I had ever met, became my salvation, and in return, I became the woman who would ruin Ethan's life. He thought he could play with my heart, but little did he know, I was about to flip the game on him. I was reborn the day of the party, the day I was meant to choose a husband. The tension in the air was palpable as the ceremony began, but something felt different this time. It wasn't just the fact that I was back here again, sitting across from two men, the same two men I had seen in my previous life. I could hear their voices, but not just with my ears. No, this time, I could hear their thoughts. It was in that moment I realized I had somehow been granted the ability to hear people's inner voices. And it didn't stop there. I could hear my sister's thoughts, too. This time, I have to grab the best husband before she does, she thought, her eyes fixed on Ethan, the gentle and kind man who had once been my husband in a past life. My heart skipped a beat. So, she had been reborn too. I glanced at her, and there it was, the same hunger in her eyes. She was plotting again, just like before. She would stop at nothing to steal him from me. But this time, I wasn't going to let her. I had to be smarter, stronger. Across the table, Logan Carter sat, cold and distant, his eyes unfeeling. He was the eldest son of the Carter family. Once, I had married him, only for that marriage to turn sour. He was everything I didn't want. But now, something about him felt different. Perhaps it was his icy demeanor, or maybe it was because I couldn't hear his thoughts. But then, a chilling realization hit me. I wasn't just hearing the thoughts of the people around me, I was seeing the depths of their schemes. And I was no longer a passive participant in this game. This time, I would take control. I would choose the path I had always wanted, one free from the manipulations of those around me. With a renewed sense of purpose, I sat straighter in my seat. It was my turn to choose. And this time, I wouldn't be fooled. This was the moment where everything changed. The dinner table was set with two men across from me, both of whom I knew all too well. One was Logan Carter, the eldest son of the prestigious Carter family, who exuded an aura of coldness, commanding respect even without trying. His gaze was distant, eyes betraying nothing of what lay beneath. He was everything I once thought I wanted, strong, stoic, and untouchable. But after what had happened in my past life, I knew better than to believe that image. My memories of him were tainted by how little he cared for me. I had been nothing more than a cold business arrangement in his eyes. The other was Ethan Carter, Logan's younger, more approachable half-brother. Ethan was the man I had once loved, or so I thought. Gentle and mild-mannered, he was everything Logan wasn't. I had married Ethan in my past life, and though he was lower in status, he had given me what I craved, comfort, love, and attention. But it had come at a cost. As time wore on, I realized that his warmth was a mask, hiding a far darker nature. At first glance, it seemed like a straightforward decision. Ethan was kind, attentive, and passionate. But as I glanced at him now, with my new abilities, something felt off. His thoughts were clearer than ever in my mind, and they weren't what I expected. What a beautiful little doll, he thought, his eyes flicking toward my sister Sophia, who was sitting beside him, leaning in just a little too close. I recoiled slightly, my heart sinking. His affection for her seemed genuine, but I could hear the twisted undercurrent of his thoughts. As if on cue, I heard Sophia's voice ring in my mind once again, this time, I have to grab the best husband first. I stiffened. Her intentions were clear, she had been reborn too, and she was determined to take Ethan for herself, no matter the cost. She hadn't even spoken, yet I could hear her thoughts as clearly as if she were right beside me, whispering them into my ear. She was already making her move, sitting next to Ethan and practically batting her lashes at him. Just wait, her voice echoed in my head, I'm going to take you away this time. Her words were so full of malice and desire that I could feel the venom in every syllable. My sister was as cunning and manipulative as ever. But it wasn't just her thoughts that alarmed me. The atmosphere around us seemed charged, tense. The air was thick with competition. I wasn't going to let her win again. This time, I would be the one to choose. Susan, it's already decided. Ethan will be mine, I heard in Sophia's thoughts once again. Her resolve was unshakable, but I could feel my own resolve hardening in response. No longer would I let her manipulate me, no longer would I let her take what was mine. I had been given a second chance to make the right choice, to escape the fate I had been bound to in the past. My father's voice interrupted my thoughts as he spoke firmly, directing his attention to me. Since your sister has already chosen Ethan Carter, you will marry Logan Carter. Sophia's face lit up with satisfaction, and in that moment, her sneer crept into her thoughts. This time, you can take the beatings for me. I clenched my jaw. Had she really thought Logan was a better option? The man I had married before had been a distant, unloving spouse, and though he was a successful businessman, our marriage had been little more than a facade. In the end, I was left with nothing but his coldness, his disregard, and his indifference to my needs. But I wasn't the same person now. I turned to Logan, sitting across from me, and for the first time, I took a long look at him. His icy presence was intimidating, yes, but there was something about him that made me hesitant to move away. Even now, he said nothing, his expression unreadable. But I could feel a strange warmth in the air around him, a quiet intensity. Still, I knew better than to trust him completely. Ethan's thoughts were like a snake, slithering through my mind, and Sophia's schemes were already set in motion. But Logan was different. There was a tension in the way he carried himself, a strength I hadn't expected. He was cold, yes, but perhaps that was just a mask, one that would shatter the moment we got closer. I glanced at Sophia again. She was staring at Ethan, her gaze fixed on him with such longing and possessiveness that I could almost feel the heat radiating from her. Her mind was consumed with the thought of making him hers, of stealing him from me, but she had no idea that this time, the game had changed. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. The man I had chosen, Logan Carter, was cold and distant, yet there was something about him that made my heart race. Perhaps it was the power he held, or perhaps it was the knowledge that I was no longer at the mercy of my sister's schemes. No longer was I her pawn. I was in control now. Days passed since the dinner party, but the unease in my chest didn't dissipate. Sophia's thoughts continued to echo in my mind, sharp and insistent, always centered on Ethan. It was clear she was no longer trying to hide her intentions. She had chosen him. I could hear her whispering in her mind, this time, I won't lose him. I'll make him see that I'm the one for him, not Susan. I couldn't help but notice the coldness in her tone when she thought about me. She doesn't deserve him. I'll take everything from her, again, she plotted. Her mind was consumed with one thought, revenge. But I could sense more than just her desire to win. I could feel the bitterness, the resentment that drove her to manipulate everyone around her. It was then that I realized something. Sophia was repeating the same mistakes she had made in our past life. She hadn't changed, hadn't learned a single thing. Her obsession with stealing Ethan from me had clouded her judgment, and she was willing to use any means necessary. Her feelings for him were laced with manipulation, as if he were nothing more than a pawn in her game to secure her own future. In the meantime, Ethan's thoughts were no better. He had always been good at hiding his true nature, wearing a mask of kindness and charm, but now I could hear his deeper, more sinister thoughts. What a beautiful little doll. I'll break her, just like I did last time, he thought as his eyes flicked towards Sophia. The realization hit me hard. Ethan hadn't changed either. He still saw women as objects, something to possess and control. The sweetness he showed on the surface was just a facade, a carefully crafted illusion. He had no intention of ever truly loving anyone. The more I listened, the more I realized how deeply manipulative and toxic their relationship was. Sophia's obsession with Ethan wasn't just about love. It was about power, about using him as a tool to climb higher, to gain the status she desperately craved. Ethan, on the other hand, wanted to keep her under his control, dominating her just as he had in our past life. Together, they were a destructive force, one I had to outmaneuver. I glanced across the room where Logan sat, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. His cold demeanor was impenetrable, his face an expressionless mask. I could hear nothing from him, no inner monologue, no thoughts drifting into my mind. It was as if he was a complete mystery to me, and that only added to the tension. I had heard about his emotional distance before, how he preferred to keep people at arm's length, how he had been cold and aloof in our past life. But now, sitting in front of him, I wasn't sure if I could trust my own instincts. Was it just his nature to be emotionally distant, or was there more to him than met the eye? I tried to read his body language, looking for any signs of affection or warmth, but there was nothing. Yet, despite his coldness, I couldn't help but notice that he seemed protective when it mattered. Once, when Sophia tried to manipulate a situation at a family gathering, Logan had stepped in, his voice low but firm. "That's enough, Sophia," he had said, and for a moment, I had seen a flicker of something more in his eyes, a quiet strength, maybe even a hint of concern. But I wasn't fooled. Logan may have saved me from Sophia's attempts to undermine me, but that didn't mean he was the knight in shining armor I needed. There was still too much about him that I didn't know, too much about his past I couldn't see. He was distant, calculating, and incredibly guarded. What if he had ulterior motives? What if he was playing his own game? As the days went by, I couldn't help but feel that Logan was still testing me in some way. He never let his guard down completely, never allowed me to get too close. And though he protected me when necessary, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was more invested in the family's legacy than he was in me. I knew I couldn't rely on him entirely, not yet. Not until I understood what he truly wanted from this arrangement. At the same time, my own ambitions were starting to take shape. I no longer felt completely helpless, tied to the whims of men like Ethan or Logan. The more I learned, the more I realized that I didn't need to depend on either of them. I had the power to change my own fate, to rise above their games. Yet, despite all of this, part of me still feared the uncertainty of my situation. I didn't know who I could trust, not fully. Ethan was a snake, and Sophia was just as dangerous, but Logan remained an enigma. He was the one man I couldn't read, couldn't predict, and that unsettled me more than anything else. I decided I had to keep my distance, at least for now. I had to be smart, play the game better than they did. I would find my own way, carve my own path, and make sure that neither of these men held power over me. But as I sat there, trying to read Logan's unreadable face, I couldn't help but wonder, was I making the right choice? Or was I walking straight into a trap of my own making? The grand banquet hall glittered with chandeliers overhead, the air thick with the mingling scent of expensive perfume and freshly cut flowers. I could feel the weight of every gaze on me as I walked into the room with Logan by my side. The noise of the crowd faded as my focus shifted. There was a strange tension in the air tonight, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I could hear the whispers, the quiet murmur of voices discussing everything from family business to my marriage. But what I couldn't ignore were the cold thoughts from across the room, Sophia and Ethan. I had warned Logan earlier. "Sophia and Ethan are planning something tonight," I had said, my voice low and filled with concern. "You need to be careful." But Logan, as always, simply gave me a brief glance before responding with his characteristic calm. "If they think they can get away with something tonight, then they've underestimated me." His tone was so assured, so confident, that for a moment, I doubted myself. Had I been too paranoid? Perhaps I was reading too much into the situation. As the night wore on, I watched Sophia and Ethan closely. Their interactions were carefully orchestrated, like two actors playing their roles perfectly. Sophia, with her usual charm, was playing the part of the perfect hostess, speaking sweetly to guests and flashing smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ethan, as always, was at her side, eager to please, but I could sense something more beneath his polite facade. His thoughts were dark, calculating, full of malice. "This will be the night I finally get rid of Logan and take everything he has," Ethan's voice echoed in my mind. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread creeping over me, but it only grew stronger as the evening progressed. Then, during the toast, I noticed Ethan slip something into the drinks. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized what he was doing. He was spiking the glasses, poison, no doubt, meant for Logan and me. A chill ran through me. He's trying to kill us, I thought in panic. The moment of realization hit hard. Ethan wasn't just playing games anymore, he was playing for keeps. I turned to Logan, who had been observing the situation with his usual unreadable expression. "Logan, they've poisoned the drinks," I whispered urgently, my heart racing. "You need to." Before I could finish, Logan turned to me with a small, almost imperceptible smirk. "I already know," he replied smoothly, his voice calm. "Don't worry. They won't get away with this." I was stunned. How had he known? I felt a strange sense of unease wash over me, but it was mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite place. Logan's confidence was contagious. Still, the knot in my stomach remained, and I couldn't shake the sense of danger that loomed over us. The toast began, and the glasses were raised. I kept my gaze locked on Logan, watching for any sign of discomfort, but he didn't flinch. He took the glass in his hand and lifted it to his lips, the movement smooth and calculated. He drank it without hesitation, as if he had done this 100 times before. For a moment, I thought I might pass out from the sheer tension in the air. Had he really switched the glasses, or was I overreacting? The seconds felt like hours as I anxiously waited for something, anything, to happen. But then, I noticed something that made my heart stop. Sophia and Ethan exchanged a brief, nervous glance, their eyes flicking to Logan, but there was no sign of him stumbling or showing any ill effects. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, though it was quickly followed by a pang of realization. Logan had known. He had been one step ahead of them the entire time. I watched, stunned, as he placed his glass down and turned toward me. His expression hadn't changed, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a gleam of satisfaction, perhaps, or maybe amusement at my shock. "It's over," Logan said quietly, as if reading my mind. "They thought they could fool me, but I'm the one who's been playing them." My breath caught in my throat as his words sank in. Logan hadn't just been calm, he had been calculating, always several moves ahead. He had known about their plot the moment it started, and he had handled it effortlessly. The poison wasn't in the drinks we'd taken. It had been switched, just as Logan had predicted. He had outsmarted them, leaving them to face the consequences of their own scheming. As I watched Logan, my admiration for him grew, but so did my unease. His strategic thinking was impressive, but it made me question how much I truly knew about him. How much of his cool, distant demeanor was a front? What else was he capable of? The mystery of Logan Carter was unraveling before my eyes, and while I couldn't deny my growing attraction to him, I also felt an overwhelming sense of caution. Logan, however, seemed unfazed by everything that had just transpired. He turned to me with a faint smile, his voice smooth as silk. "Are you all right?" he asked, though his eyes told me he already knew the answer. His calm, collected demeanor was both reassuring and unsettling at the same time. He had known exactly what to do, and I realized just how much control he had over everything. In that moment, I understood that Logan was far more than just the cold, distant man I had once married. I nodded, still processing everything. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice betrayed me, trembling ever so slightly. Logan's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "Good. Let's finish this, then. It's time to deal with them." Sophia and Ethan, unaware that their plot had been foiled, continued to play their roles, but the night's events had already set everything in motion. With Logan's calm authority and calculated moves, he had secured the upper hand, and I realized then that, for the first time, I wasn't the one in danger. I was protected by him. The days that followed the banquet felt oddly quiet. With Sophia and Ethan locked away in the underground cell, there was a strange sense of relief that settled over me. They were no longer a threat, at least not for now. I had finally managed to outsmart them, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without the weight of their scheming hanging over me. But I knew better than to believe the conflict was truly over. They were still dangerous, still vengeful, and I had no illusions about how far they would go to get what they wanted. As I walked through the halls of the mansion, my footsteps echoing in the silence, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. Now that Sophia and Ethan were temporarily out of the picture, it was time to focus on my future. The thought of divorcing Logan had been nagging at the back of my mind for days. Our marriage, while necessary for security, was nothing more than a business arrangement. But that didn't mean I had to stay bound by it forever. I had dreams of my own, dreams that didn't involve living in the shadow of either Logan or my sister. I wanted to build something for myself, something I could be proud of. I had already started planning, slowly and quietly, laying the groundwork for my own business. I would become independent, free of both Logan's control and the toxic influence of my sister. But as much as I tried to focus on my future, a part of me couldn't ignore the growing tension between Logan and me. His actions at the banquet, his ability to outmaneuver everyone around us, had left a deep impression on me. Logan wasn't just the cold, distant man I had once known. There was more to him, something deeper that I couldn't yet understand. He was capable of so much more than I had imagined. His sharp intelligence, his strategic thinking, it was all too clear that he wasn't just playing the same game as everyone else. He was playing a game of his own, and I had no idea what his ultimate goal was. Still, I couldn't afford to get distracted by him. I needed to stay focused, to keep moving forward with my own plans. The thought of being tied to Logan, of living a life where I had no control, was suffocating. No matter how much he may have helped me in the past, no matter how much he may have protected me, I couldn't depend on him forever. That evening, after a long day of managing some of the business dealings I had quietly started to build, I decided it was time to confront Sophia and Ethan. They had been locked away in the underground cell ever since the poisoning plot had been foiled, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to make a move again. I needed to face them, to remind them that I was not the same woman I had been before. I made my way to the cell, the cold stone walls and dim light adding to the sense of foreboding. As I approached the bars, I could hear Sophia's voice, low and angry, her thoughts swirling with hatred. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've outsmarted me. But you have no idea what's coming next, Susan. I'll make sure you regret this." Her anger was palpable, but so was her desperation. She had always been so determined, so driven by her need to win. But I wasn't going to let her win this time. Not when I had the upper hand. I stood there for a moment, taking in her rage, before I spoke. "Sophia," I said calmly, my voice carrying through the cold, empty space. "You've made your move, and it's failed. This time, there's no getting out of it. You'll never have what you want." She sneered at me, her eyes flashing with fury. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" She thought bitterly. "But you're nothing. You're just as weak as I always knew you were." I let her words wash over me, but they didn't affect me the way they used to. I had learned to let go of her venom, to see through her attempts to manipulate me. She was no longer a threat. Turning to Ethan, I found him sitting quietly in the corner of the cell, his thoughts as dark as ever. "You think I'm done? You think this is the end?" He thought, his voice dripping with malice. "I'll make you regret everything you've done. You'll see what happens when you betray me." Ethan's cold, twisted thoughts filled the space around me, but I didn't flinch. I had been through worse. I had survived him before, and I would do it again. "You've lost, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "Both of you have. There's no way out now. You can't hurt me anymore." I turned on my heel and left the cell, the door slamming shut behind me. As I walked away, I felt a surge of relief. The immediate danger was over, but I knew it wasn't truly finished. There would always be more threats, more manipulations, and more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, I felt confident. I was taking control of my own life, and nothing was going to stop me. Logan was still a question mark in my mind, but I knew one thing for certain: my future didn't depend on him. I was going to build my own path, become the person I was meant to be. And if Logan was part of that future, then it would be on my terms. But for now, I had to stay focused. The road ahead was mine to pave. The underground cell was as cold and unwelcoming as ever, the stone walls and dim light casting an eerie atmosphere around me as I approached. The heavy door creaked open, and I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Sophia and Ethan were seated at opposite ends of the small, confined space. Their eyes locked onto me the moment I entered, and I could hear their thoughts almost immediately, sharp, bitter, and full of resentment. Sophia's mind was a storm of anger and frustration. "You think you've won, don't you? You've always had everything handed to you, but I won't let you ruin me again. I'll make sure you regret everything, Susan. Just wait." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak aloud. She didn't need to, her thoughts were more than enough. I let her thoughts linger in the air for a moment, absorbing the venom that seeped from every word. But I didn't let it affect me. I had heard it all before, and it no longer held any power over me. Instead, I focused on Ethan, sitting in the corner, his expression as cold as always, but his thoughts were far darker. "You don't get it, do you?" Ethan's voice dripped with twisted satisfaction. "You think you're in control, but I've been playing you all along. Just wait, once I get out of here, I'll make you pay for this. You'll never be able to escape me." His thoughts were filled with malice, but there was a twisted admiration buried deep beneath his anger. He still thought he could dominate me. He was wrong. I took a step forward, not flinching, my voice steady as I addressed them both. "You both have no idea what you're up against. You thought you could control everything, but now it's over. You're done." Sophia hissed, her face twisted in fury. "You ruined my life," she thought, her anger flaring. "You've always been the perfect one, always the one Dad wanted, always the one everyone adored. But I won't let you get away with this. I'll make sure you pay." Her bitterness was so thick I could almost taste it, but I refused to let her poison my mind. I turned to face her directly, my voice sharp as I spoke. "You've been playing this game your whole life, trying to manipulate everyone around you, trying to take what you want. But look where it's gotten you, locked away in a cell, while I'm standing here, free to make my own decisions. You rely on men, Sophia, and that's your downfall. You think they'll solve your problems, but in the end, they'll always be the ones who control you. That's what happened to you, and that's what will keep happening unless you change." Her face twisted with rage as she shot back, "You think you're better than me? You've always had everything handed to you, Susan. I've had to fight for everything. I've had to scrape and claw to survive, and you've never had to do a thing. Don't talk to me about control." Her voice faltered with bitterness, but I wasn't about to back down. I had heard her thoughts, and I knew her better than she knew herself. "You're right," I said, my words deliberate and cutting. "I've had things handed to me, but I'm not relying on anyone now. I'm building my own life, something you'll never understand. You think being with men will get you what you want, but it only makes you weak. You rely on them for validation, for power. I'm done with that. I'm taking control of my own future." Sophia's face darkened, and I could see the fury building in her. She wanted to lash out, but she was trapped, her words were nothing more than empty threats now. She had no power here. "You're nothing," she thought, her anger simmering beneath the surface. "I'll make sure you regret everything. Just wait, Susan. You'll see." I turned my gaze to Ethan, who had been eerily silent, his eyes locked on me. His thoughts were a mess of hatred and twisted desire. "You think you can control this, don't you?" His voice was venomous. "You think you're smart, but you're just a pawn in all of this. You'll never escape me, Susan. You'll always be mine. Even if you try to run, I'll come for you." His words grated on me, but I didn't let them get to me. "You're deluded, Ethan," I said, meeting his cold gaze. "You think I'll ever go back to you? You think you still have power over me after everything you've done? I'm done being your victim. You may have controlled me once, but I won't let you do it again." I took a deep breath, feeling my strength surge within me. I wasn't the scared, vulnerable woman I once was. I had grown stronger, more determined. And with each word I spoke, I could feel my control over the situation tighten. "You two are done. Your schemes, your lies, they won't work anymore. I'm moving forward, and I'll make sure neither of you ever hurts me again. Sophia's eyes flashed with rage, and for a moment, I thought she might try to lunge at me, but she remained still, her hands gripping the bars of the cell in frustration. I won't lose, she thought. You'll see. I'll make sure you regret everything, Susan. I looked at Ethan one last time, his mind swirling with dark thoughts. I'll be watching you, Susan, he thought, but his words no longer held power. I had seen through them. I had won. I turned and walked out of the cell, the door slamming shut behind me. As I stepped back into the hall, I felt a surge of triumph. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was the one in control. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my life, not Sophia, not Ethan, and not even Logan. This was my time, and I would make sure I was the one who shaped my future. The evening was quiet, too quiet, and as I sat in the study with Logan, the weight of the silence seemed almost unbearable. He had been unusually distant in recent days, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling me. He had always been a mystery, but tonight, I had the sense that I was on the verge of understanding him better. I glanced at him, watching as he flipped through the papers on his desk. There was something about the way he moved, his calm, methodical manner, that only served to deepen the mystery surrounding him. His coldness had always kept me at arm's length, and though I had grown accustomed to it, I couldn't help but feel that there was more beneath the surface. Suddenly, he looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart race. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me, as if searching for something, maybe answers, maybe my thoughts. His gaze lingered, and I felt a strange tension in the air. What's going on, Logan? I wondered, the question weighing heavily in my mind. Without warning, Logan stood up and walked toward the window, his back to me as he spoke in a quiet, almost reluctant tone. There's something I've never told you, Susan. Something you need to know about me. His voice was low, but the seriousness in it made my heart skip a beat. This wasn't just some casual conversation, it was something important, something that would change everything between us. I waited in silence, unsure of what to say. My mind raced with possibilities, but nothing could have prepared me for what he was about to reveal. Logan turned slowly, his face still guarded, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, something I had never seen before. I wasn't always Logan Carter, he began, his voice softer now. When I was a child, I was known as Chase. I was the boy who didn't quite fit in. I didn't come from the world of wealth and power like the other children around me. I was different, more sensitive, more aware of things others couldn't see. I didn't realize it at first, but I had a gift. A gift that made me feel even more alone than I already did. I stood there, shocked by his words. Logan, the man I had married, the man who had always seemed so emotionally distant, had been someone else entirely before. I couldn't help but be curious about the person he had been. The Chase he spoke of sounded so different from the Logan I knew now. I could hear people's thoughts, Susan, Logan continued, his voice tinged with a sadness I hadn't expected. It was both a gift and a curse. I could hear everyone, friends, strangers, even family, but there was one person whose thoughts I could never get out of my head. Yours. I froze, my heart pounding. I had always thought that my ability to hear thoughts was something unique to me, something that set me apart. But to hear that Logan, too, had the same ability, was something I hadn't even considered. You could hear my thoughts? I whispered, disbelief creeping into my voice. He nodded, a faint, almost wistful smile playing at the corners of his lips. Yes, Susan. I've been hearing your thoughts for years, ever since we were children. I couldn't help it. You were always in my mind, always there, even when I tried to block you out. He paused for a moment, his eyes softening as if lost in the memory. When you stood up for me as a child, when everyone else mocked me for being different, it was you who protected me. You never even realized it, but you were the only person who truly saw me. And for that, I've always been grateful. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with emotion. I had no words, no way to process what I was hearing. I had known Logan as a cold, calculating man, someone who seemed distant and unfeeling, but hearing him speak of his past, of his struggles, was like peeling away a mask to reveal the person underneath. I didn't realize who you were at the time, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I knew you were special to me, but I never understood why. When I learned I could hear your thoughts, I realized something that terrified me. I had always been drawn to you, even as a child. But I knew I could never tell you. I had to remain silent, remain in the shadows, because I was afraid that if I let you in, you'd see me as weak. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Logan had been emotionally invested in me from the very beginning, even before we were married. The cold, distant persona I had grown accustomed to was just a defense mechanism, a way to protect himself from his own feelings, from the vulnerability of truly connecting with someone. My mind raced as I processed everything he had just revealed. Logan A. Chase had always been there, always watching, always waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. His cold demeanor wasn't an act of indifference, it was a shield, a way to protect himself from getting hurt. And I, in my ignorance, had never truly understood it. I've spent years hiding who I really am, Logan said, his voice raw with emotion. But now, I can't keep pretending. I can't keep running from the truth. Susan, I've always cared for you. I've always wanted to be with you, but I couldn't let myself. I couldn't let myself feel anything for anyone, because I was afraid of losing them. My breath caught in my throat. The walls that had always stood between us, the emotional distance that had kept me at arm's length, were slowly crumbling. Logan's vulnerability, his honesty, was a revelation. For the first time, I saw the man behind the mask, and I realized just how much we shared. Logan, I began, but the words caught in my throat. There was too much to say, too much to process. But in that moment, I understood. The coldness, the distance, it had all been part of a defense mechanism. And now, for the first time, I could see the real Logan. I didn't want to scare you away, he said quietly, as if reading my mind. But now, I need you to understand. I've been waiting for you, Susan. I've always been waiting. The weight of his words settled over me like a blanket, and I knew, in that instant, that everything between us had changed. Our relationship, once built on misunderstanding and emotional walls, was now something deeper, something real. And as I looked into Logan's eyes, I finally saw him for who he truly was, the man who had been there all along, even when I hadn't known it. The evening felt suffocating. The quiet of the house had settled into something heavy, something uncomfortable, and I found myself standing at the window, gazing out into the darkness. The coldness of the night mirrored the conflict inside me. I had made my decision. I had to leave Logan. Our marriage had been a business arrangement from the beginning, and as much as I had hoped for something more, I had to accept that this was the life I had chosen for myself. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone. I would be independent, self-sufficient, and free from the weight of expectations and emotional entanglements. But even as I stood there, I could feel the tug of uncertainty. Logan had done things for me, things I hadn't asked for, things that had saved me from situations I couldn't control. And every time I thought of leaving, there was a part of me that resisted. But I had to do this. It wasn't just about freedom, it was about proving to myself that I could survive on my own, without anyone's help, without anyone holding power over me. I turned to leave the room, but before I could make it to the door, I heard his voice. Susan, Logan's voice broke through the silence, low and calm but filled with a kind of tension I hadn't expected. I froze, turning slowly to face him. He was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable but his eyes intense, locked onto mine. We need to talk, he said, his tone serious. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. This was it, the conversation I had been avoiding. The moment I had to tell him what I had been planning all along. Logan, I think it's time we, before I could finish, he interrupted, his voice quiet but filled with something raw. I know what you're going to say. But before you say it, I need to tell you something. His gaze softened, and for the first time in a long while, there was no mask. No coldness. Just vulnerability. It was enough to make me hesitate, enough to make me question the certainty I had felt earlier. He stepped closer, the distance between us shrinking with each step. I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything, he began, his words slow, deliberate. I know I've been distant, Susan. I know I've kept you at arm's length, but it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I couldn't allow myself to care. I was afraid. My breath caught in my throat. I had heard those words before, in different ways, from different people. But from Logan, this Logan, it felt like something more. Something real. Afraid of what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a moment, as though choosing his words carefully. Then, he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I had never noticed before, something deep in his eyes. Afraid of losing you, he admitted softly. I've always known how important you are to me. But I thought if I kept my distance, if I didn't let myself feel anything, I wouldn't have to face the possibility of you walking away. I couldn't risk it. His words hit me like a wave, sweeping away everything I thought I knew about him. Logan, cold, distant Logan, was afraid. Afraid of losing me? It was almost impossible to reconcile with the man I had thought I understood. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized the truth. He had always been emotionally invested in me, even though he had never shown it. I swallowed hard, my emotions swirling in a way I hadn't expected. I had always seen Logan as the man who didn't need anyone, the man who could do everything on his own. But hearing him admit his vulnerability made me question everything I had believed. Was he really the cold businessman I had once thought him to be, or had I misjudged him all along? I never wanted to hurt you, Logan continued, his voice low, almost raw. I wanted to protect you. But in doing so, I pushed you away. I've been testing you, Susan, pushing you to see if you'd fight for us, fight for me. But now, I see I've been doing it all wrong. I stood there in stunned silence. The words he had spoken weren't the ones I had expected to hear. I had come into this conversation ready to tell him that I wanted a divorce, that I was walking away from this marriage. But hearing him speak like this, seeing his genuine remorse and vulnerability, made everything feel more complicated. My emotions, which had once been clear and focused on independence, were now tangled with something I hadn't anticipated, the possibility that Logan and I shared a deeper connection than I had realized. You've tested me? I whispered, still trying to make sense of what he was saying. Is that why you've been so distant? Why you've kept pushing me away? He nodded, his expression regretful. Yes. I thought if you fought for me, if you proved you wanted to stay, I would know for sure that we were meant to be. But I see now that it was wrong. I've been asking the wrong questions. And now, I'm asking you, do you want to stay? Or do you want to leave? The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I needed to be free, that I didn't want to depend on him, but something stopped me. His vulnerability, his honesty, it made it hard to push him away. And deep down, I realized something, the connection between us was real. It wasn't perfect, and it hadn't been easy, but it was real. And maybe that was enough. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my chest. I don't know, I said quietly. I don't know what I want anymore. But I do know this, I need to figure it out on my own. Logan's gaze softened. Take all the time you need, Susan. I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, I realized that Logan wasn't just a man who had been testing me, he had been testing himself, too. We were both caught in a web of uncertainty, but somehow, for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. The decision that had been weighing on my heart for so long was now unavoidable. It was a strange feeling, standing at the edge of something so monumental, so deeply personal, and yet so simple at the same time. The choice between love and independence had seemed so clear in my mind for so long. I had believed that to keep my independence, to control my own fate, I had to let go of the idea of love. I couldn't allow myself to rely on anyone, not even Logan. But now, as I stood in the dim light of the study, I realized that I had been wrong. Logan had been waiting for me to make this decision, but he wasn't forcing me to choose him. He wasn't holding me hostage with promises or ultimatums. Instead, he was allowing me to come to this conclusion on my own, giving me the space to decide what was truly important. His patience, his understanding, his quiet strength had shown me that love didn't have to be something that controlled me. It could be something that supported me, something that made me stronger, not weaker. I had built my life on the idea that I needed to be independent, that I couldn't let anyone have power over me. And for a long time, that belief had served me well. It had kept me safe, kept me from being hurt, and allowed me to carve out my own path. But as I looked at Logan now, as I saw the sincerity in his eyes and the vulnerability he had shown me, I understood that my idea of independence had been incomplete. I didn't need to choose between love and independence. I could have both. My heart ached as the realization settled in. Logan had always been there for me, even when I didn't know it. He had always cared, even when I had pushed him away. He had never tried to control me, he had only wanted to protect me. The distance between us had always been a defense mechanism, but now, I saw it for what it was: fear. Fear of getting too close, fear of losing me. And in that moment, I understood that I wasn't the only one who had been guarding my heart. Logan had been doing the same. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, closing the distance between us. His eyes were steady on mine, waiting, as if he already knew what I was going to say. But still, I hesitated. There was so much I wanted to say, so much I needed to understand, but the most important thing was clear. I had been afraid of letting him in, afraid of needing him, afraid of losing my independence. But now, I realized that my independence didn't have to come at the cost of love. "Logan," I said softly, my voice trembling with the weight of everything that had led me to this moment. "I've been so focused on proving to myself that I could stand on my own, that I forgot what it means to be loved. I've been afraid of letting anyone in, but I see now that I've been shutting you out because I was scared. Scared of losing myself." Logan's gaze softened, and he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "You don't have to lose yourself, Susan. I've never asked you to. I've only ever wanted to be with you, to share something real." I felt my heart swell at his words. The walls I had built around myself, the fears that had kept me distant from him, all seemed to fade in that moment. I realized that love wasn't about control or weakness, it was about choice, about trust. And in this moment, I was choosing Logan. I was choosing love. "I don't want to lose myself either," I said, my voice steady now. "But I don't have to. I don't have to choose between being independent and loving you. I can have both. I can be with you, and still be myself." The tension between us dissolved in an instant, and before I knew it, Logan's arms were around me, pulling me close. For the first time, I let myself relax into him, let myself feel the warmth of his embrace. I had spent so long pushing him away, so long resisting everything he had offered, but now, I knew. I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't have to be. "I've always loved you, Susan," Logan whispered into my hair, his voice low and sincere. "I've always wanted you to choose me, but I've never wanted to control you." I nodded against his chest, feeling his words resonate in my soul. "I choose you, Logan. I choose us." It was a simple statement, but it carried everything I had been feeling, the fears, the doubts, the uncertainty, all of it. But now, I knew that choosing Logan wasn't about losing myself. It was about embracing the love we shared, and allowing it to make us both stronger. As I pulled back slightly, I looked up at him, my heart full of a truth I had never fully understood until now. "Let's build a future together," I said, my voice confident, my eyes steady on his. "One where we both stand on our own, but where we also have each other." Logan smiled, the warmth in his eyes softening his usual stoic expression. "Together, then," he said, and in that moment, I knew that we had both chosen something beautiful. Love, and the strength to stand together, without losing who we were. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy, the kind that comes when you finally feel at peace with your choices. Logan and I had found a new rhythm, one that was built on mutual understanding and respect. We no longer needed to speak to know what the other was thinking, we simply knew. The distance that had once existed between us had evaporated, replaced by an intimacy that had grown naturally over time. I had learned to trust him, to let go of the fears that had once held me back. And in turn, Logan had learned to open up, to share his vulnerabilities with me, trusting that I wouldn't turn away. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made all the difference. As the weeks passed, I found myself more focused than ever on my future. I no longer had to choose between independence and love. With Logan by my side, I could pursue my ambitions freely, knowing I had someone who supported me unconditionally. He encouraged me to chase my dreams, even when I doubted myself, and I did the same for him. Together, we were building something neither of us had thought possible, a partnership where both of us could grow and thrive. I had finally found the balance I had long searched for. I wasn't just the woman by Logan's side anymore, I was Susan, the woman in control of her own destiny. And Logan, my equal, stood beside me as we faced the future together. The road ahead was filled with possibilities, and for the first time, I looked forward to it with hope, knowing that no matter what came our way, we would face it hand in hand.